There's often times where you could see someone who's on the pulpit or somebody who we would idolize get torn down by their human errors, their sins, or their imperfection. And then we would look at that as like, you see, I knew it was all BS, but not recognizing like the book doesn't co-sign that behavior.
I've never been religious myself, and so I love to hear the role that plays. And I know that faith plays a big role in your life, and you talk about it a lot within the Noble Knights. So do you want to just talk to that? Like what role has faith played in this whole process of personal development?
Oh man, it's a journey. It's a journey just as much as my journey of being the best man I could be. And a lot of it has been growing over the years. I still have a ways to go, to be transparent and honest, but similar to my mentorship and those who I've followed, some of the most impactful men in my life, they all have something in common, and it's their faith. And it's their biblical foundation. And I spend a lot of my time seeking knowledge. I spend a lot of my time looking for insights. And as I follow these men and I hear the words that they share, and I look at some wisdom throughout the world, I find like it keeps coming back to the Bible. Like, oh snap, that's in the Bible. That was in the Bible. That was in the Bible. I grew up going to Catholic school. So I was raised Catholic. I now am more of a practicing Christian than Catholic, but that had me in a very rigid structure for religion. And as a lot of folks who I've spoken to who grow up, whether it's growing up in the church, growing up highly structured in that, there was some years of rebellion, right? There was some times I was far from God. And in that, my life reflected it. And then as I was getting older and I was working on the modern man and I'm tapping into other men, they're praying over me. They're instilling their biblical knowledge and wisdom into me. And then I got curious enough to pick up the Bible myself, because a lot of times we listen to sermons, we listen to these pastors, and again, these are eloquent speakers, but as men, we are flawed. As people, we are flawed. And there's often times where you could see someone who's on the pulpit or somebody who we would idolize get torn down by their human errors, their sins, or their imperfection. And then we would look at that as like, you see, I knew it was all BS, but not recognizing like the book doesn't co-sign that behavior. And as I started going more and more through the source and the process, and we talk about relationships and accountability, I've been going through the Bible with my friend, and we're just pulling knowledge from it. Not even heavily just focused on the religious or the spiritual aspect of it, but like, let's just look at this as a guide and just a book of knowledge. And what I found is like, there's so many self-help books and there's so many approaches in life that have been foundational. I'm like, they got that from this book. Specifically going through the book of Proverbs, which many would tell you that's the book of wisdom. I remember talking to my friend, and I said, listen, I've always wanted to find wisdom and education in the world. And this whole time I've had this Bible in my nightstand that my aunt gave to me. She overcame cancer, gave me the Bible, and she's been praying for me every day since. And like, man, this Bible's been really just in my nightstand this whole time. And I never once opened it. And then my buddy was like, man, isn't that crazy how God's been sitting right next to you this whole time, just trying to talk to you? And I'm a very logical person, right? Being a man of science, being a meteorologist by trade. And someone asked me and said, how could you be a man of science and have such strong faith? And I'm like, well, science answers how. It doesn't answer why. So I could go back as far as I want, Big Bang and everything. The Flash, boom, we exist. Big Bang, great. Okay, that could be how. And the universe expands, the atoms and all the elements, but why? It's a mystery. And that's where I believe religion comes into play. So as I'm reading the book and I'm going through the Bible, I'm learning about the life of Jesus. I'm seeing the parallels between his rebellion and how oftentimes we go against society. A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of men listening, they find themselves at odds with society in certain areas. So did Jesus, you know? And I'm like, these things have been lining up way too much for me to ignore. So I've been following that path, and I've been building that relationship. And someone was just like, I was like, I've never seen God in my life. And he's like, okay, well, imagine, you're calling somebody, and they don't pick up. You call less and less, but you're still calling. So as I've been reading through the Bible and I've been going through life with more faith, I was like, okay, well, how do I know if I hear God or I see God? And I started recognizing that we ask God for things all the time. Oh God, if I just get through this, and then, or oh God, I hope nothing's wrong with our daughter when we go to the doctors, right? And these are subtle little prayers that we have left and right. And as I've really built in my faith journey, I started seeing like, man, how many times do we ask God for something, he answers the prayer, we don't give him credit. Like, oh yeah, that was just me. And what I'm finding is, as certain situations happen in life, I've been leaning more on my trust in God. I've been leaning more on just hands up, putting my faith in the work and seeing what the outcome is. And there's things that have happened that, man, I just can't explain, that line up perfectly. And we could say it's a coincidence or the other thing that just line up perfectly. And I'm like, and even my friends would be like, all right, Ted, you say that all the time. I go, look at God. Because it's just, as I've stepped in that faith, I've seen things come into fruition. And even still asking with ambitions I've had that could derail me from this mission of modern man, that could make me a whole lot more money. And I'm just like, God, should I stay on this path? Why should I stay on this path? Are you sure you don't want me to go anywhere else? And then something will conspire, something will happen that helps boost the modern man, or a deal comes in, or I get a phone call just as I'm ready to give up, or just as I'm ready to throw in the towel, something else comes. And for me, that's where I'm starting to see in my personal experience, in my personal perspective, the signs and the answers of God in my life. And I've been following that ever since. And it's been helpful bringing my wife into that journey. We pray together at night. And it's just been a huge relief, if I could say. Because oftentimes we try and carry the weight of the world on our shoulders as men. Like, it's got to be on me. I got to handle this. I got to handle that. And I could be honest, man, there's things I look at in my life, in my business. I mean, I manage the podcast, coaching, the community, a full-time job, a workout regimen, training for a High Rocks, Muay Thai, and I'm being a present father. I have a lot of stuff going on. And people are like, man, how do you hold it? How do you carry all that weight? And like Kobe Bryant said, until you have a weight you can't carry, and God carries you and that weight, then you'll understand. And that's kind of where I've been in life, is many opportunities. I would think to myself, like, man, I can't do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then somehow, some way we get through it. And that's kind of like the footprints in the sand poem, of two sets of footprints in the sand. And then one disappears and he looks back and he says, God, why'd you leave me? And he's like, well, when you see one set of footprints in the sand, I didn't leave you. That's when I carried you. And that's what I think a lot of us go through life, especially as men who go through some of these challenges. At the very least, it doesn't have to be God, Jesus as your faith. But I do believe if we don't believe in something bigger than ourselves, if we don't tap into something larger than ourselves, we will crumble and deteriorate under our own pressure and under our own weight.